There is a spiritual application for this as well, and this is what a lot of Judaism just shoves to the side today.
Shalom, and welcome to False Messiah, where we expose Christianity's distortion of the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Tanakh. In today's episode, we'll be continuing to look at Courtney Smith's arguments about whether Zechariah 13:6 is about the Messiah or a false prophet.
If you're not aware, the prophets write in a very specific way that sometimes can be difficult. They will write with a prophetic mention inside of a historical recounting from the past or inside of a current historical event happening. This is what Isaiah 7 actually is doing. So it's historical in context, meaning the Civil War happening. But if you get to 7 verse 14, it jumps you into the future.
That is a lie. Isaiah 7:14 does not use the prophetic imperfect or future tense. The Hebrew word used there is hara, which is perfect tense and means is pregnant. It does not say will conceive as the author of Matthew quotes it. This is just another mistranslation of Isaiah 7:14 by the author of Matthew, besides his obvious blunder of Alma as virgin. So Courtney is using one debunked messianic interpretation to prove another.
So it's like in the chapter, the prophet is already bringing you to the idea of the Mashiach, right? The Redeemer, the one who will come. In the Jewish mindset, this is the final redemption, but there is a spiritual application for this as well. And this is what a lot of Judaism just shoves to the side today.
Judaism does not shove this to the side because this whole idea was never part of Judaism to begin with. The idea of a Messiah who's meant to suffer and die for the sins of the world was invented by Christianity because Jesus failed at the main job of Messiah, which is to redeem Israel. So they had to come up with a whole new aspect of Messiah. This is seen within the Gospels themselves. For example, in Matthew chapter 16, after Jesus predicts his suffering and death, Peter rebukes Jesus, telling him that this will not happen to him. Didn't Peter know that the job of Messiah is to suffer and die? So why is he telling him that this won't happen to him? Again, in chapter 17, after Jesus predicts his death and suffering a second time, the disciples are distressed about it. Why are they distressed about it if this is what Messiah is meant to do? In the Gospel of Luke, after Jesus predicts his death, the disciples don't even know what he's talking about. A clear contradiction between the two Gospels. If Messiah's job was to suffer and die, why don't they know about it? So it is clear that this idea of a suffering and dying Messiah was not known to anyone until Christianity came around. In fact, the whole idea that the Hebrew Bible predicts a suffering and dying Messiah was also only invented after Jesus' crucifixion. In Luke chapter 24, after Jesus was crucified, he shows up to 2 disciples who, for some odd reason, cannot recognize him. They express their disappointment to him that they, like the rest of Judaism, expected a Messiah who would redeem them, and instead, Jesus got crucified. So he starts to explain to them how Moses and all the prophets predicted that the Messiah must suffer and die. So we see that the disciples were unaware that the Hebrew Bible spoke about a suffering and dying Messiah until Jesus came along and explained it to them. Ironically, it is actually Christianity that shoves the whole idea of a redeeming Messiah to the side, because Jesus did not do that. This is why Isaiah chapter 11, which describes the Messianic king and the Messianic era, is almost never quoted in the New Testament. Isaiah chapter 2, which describes the glory of God in the Messianic era, isn't either quoted in the New Testament. Ezekiel chapter 37, which describes Israel and the Messianic king, in the Messianic era isn't either quoted in the New Testament. Jeremiah chapter 33, which describes the return of Israel's glory in the Messianic era, isn't either quoted in the New Testament. And other than the first verse of Micah chapter 5, the rest of the chapter, which describes the mission of the Messiah, isn't either in the New Testament. So why is it that the New Testament, which is allegedly all about the Messiah, doesn't quote all these messianic passages? It is because Jesus failed to fulfill a single one of those prophecies. So Christianity had to shove to the side the idea of a redeeming Messiah and instead invent a new one, a Messiah who suffers and dies for the sins of the world. This is something which is very convenient for Christianity because atonement for sins cannot be observed, so it cannot be falsified. So Christianity invented a Messiah which cannot be disproven. Furthermore, during the late Second Temple period, when messianic expectations were high and there were a wide range of views about the Messiah, we don't find anywhere in late Second Temple literature that the Messiah was meant to suffer and die for the sins of the world. This is because this whole idea of a suffering Messiah was invented by Christianity. So what's actually happening is that Christianity is making up a new kind of Messiah and making up new interpretations on the Hebrew Bible, which the New Testament itself admits was not around before Jesus. Then they impose those interpretations on the Hebrew Bible and claim that the Jews are ignoring those messianic passages while shoving the entire Torah to the side in favor of belief in this new type of Messiah. Then they wonder why Jews reject Jesus.